Okay, good morning, good evening. My question is, what do you think about, what do you think are the most pressing concerns and or responsibilities of Buddhist studies scholars? If you were to design a Buddhist studies program, what would this curriculum look like? And what should we be addressing and teaching in our university courses?
Okay, well, first of all, I express my gratitude, and it's a very big honor for me to be speaking to you. As you may notice, I put a very high regard and I really value the academic studies, both in the traditional setting and also in the academic world beyond sort of the traditional Tibetan, whatever, Himalayan traditional setting. Because I think as we always hear that when you enter, especially Buddha Dharma, hearing and contemplation is almost like the indispensable foundation. And I believe that this is what happens in the Shedra situation and therefore in the academic world. The question you just put me, this is a very big question for me. I don't know how I'm going to answer this. Hopefully we will actually maybe discuss. I think this actually requires a lot of discussion. It's big because historically, I feel that it's sort of unfortunate that Buddhism got categorized into some sort of a religion. And now I know that there's always this kind of statement like Buddhism is not a religion, Buddhism is a philosophy, Buddhism is science, so on and so forth. But I'm actually speaking in a very, very kind of in many sort of different aspects when it comes to language and when it comes to custom, tradition, therefore. So all this, I mean, even like, let's choose language, for instance. Now, even the words like nirvana, for instance, how we are translating this word, how we are approaching this word, this need to be really analyzed, and this need to really go deep. I think because the Western academic system really, even though it has a lot of its flaw, it really has the promise of kind of analyze the tradition of analyzing, open attitude, I don't know. So I think like, how should I put it? Okay, so see, even like when people look at me, okay, so they see me as a Buddhist, a practicing Buddhist. So what are you looking for, right? What are you aiming for? What is your goal? Then of course, the standard classic answer is, I'm looking for enlightenment, nirvana, whatever. And of course, forget like countries that has no Buddhist background, even within the traditional Buddhist society, now the idea of the samsara, idea of liberation has become something very religious, something very, something very, spiritual. And here again, even the word spiritual, many times I wonder whether Buddhism is even what we term spiritual, because I think when I'm looking at the meaning of the word spiritual, and when I think about Buddhism in general, I don't know how much is this misleading, So for instance, if you're looking at like a Kanjur, the classic Buddhist sutra text, many times you will notice like, oh, so-and-so, when she or he went to meet Buddha, and then after encountering the Buddha and after the bit of a discussion, so-and-so has Demba Thong. Demba Thong means he or she has seen the truth. See, so I would have really liked the people really see it this way. Now, there's, of course, the traditional Buddhist societies like the Tibetan or the Nepali or the Bhutanese, of course, there is that seemingly very religious rituals like an incense, the shrine. Anyway, so I don't know. It would be really good even if you guys can study how Dharma actually came to the West. It would be really interesting, something, how it, the history of Buddhism. I think history is quite important. Language, study of language is important. History of how Buddhism actually came. Like even between, like how Buddhism went to China, because China is a very, very sophisticated country, and they have a very, very sophisticated sort of system and thinking, like Taoism, for instance. So that has influence language-wise, the way people understand, way people, interpret. Just like that, when Buddhism came to West in many different ways, some maybe the immigrants have brought, like in Australia's case, a lot of Chinese went there, and I was told that it was the Chinese who brought Buddhism first time. But how did they bring as a sort of a Chinese, like a cultural thing, or were there philosophical actual study and, practice? These are the things that I think it could help, I feel. And then, as I was saying, language. Now, if you are talking about, just to answer the question, I would say the main thing, on top of language, history, of course, the main thing that we should put emphasis is on the view, not meditation, not action, not ethic, not like morality, not the rituals, but the view of the Sharvakayana, Mahayana. I don't know. I think that is something that may be, and not only the view, actually, yeah, this is probably more important, how the view is established. Recently, I was talking to some Advaita Hindu students, and you know how Advaita Vedanta, there is a very, very, very similarity, especially with the Tantric Buddhism. I mean, yeah, Vajrayana. And I was telling them, probably there are probably few things that are different, but one major difference between the Advaita and Buddhism is Buddhism has quite a good, what we say in Tibetan, tawa tenlam, which means how the view is constructed and established, such as through the study of like a Madhyamika. But when we say study of a Madhyamika, we will be studying Vabhyashika, Sautrantika, and then, Chittamata, and how, through the argument and through the analysis, we come to the conclusion of the Madhyamika. So the establishment, how the view is formed, I think this is quite crucial. Probably this is something that you may not hear so much in, let's say, in Japan, for instance, like Zen Buddhism. So you go to a temple and then they may recite like a Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, everything is shunyata, everything is just your projection, which is fine. But I think it will be good if people can study how view is actually is. Now, let's talk about as a method to make a student or a disciple to understand the view. So it is believed that, let's say, okay, the Buddha, out of compassion, he wants people to understand the truth. Now, because if you don't see the truth, you are bound by illusion, and you are looking at an illusion and think it's real. And this is what we call avidya, ignorance. And you are bound to be disappointed with that kind of misconception. But the way the truth is presented, so when we talk about presenting the truth, it depends on how the capacity of the student. So maybe the first thing you can really talk about is something that is quite obvious, something that is quite, you don't need too much philosophical argument. Let's say like all compounded things are impermanent. So even in the Sharvakayana, probably the first thing you will hear a lot is anicca. Everything is impermanent. Now, this is a truth. Now, then once that is established, which is supposedly fairly easy to establish through logic and through empiricism, so to speak, then you bring the next truth, which is that all the sort of distinctions that came from dualistic mind leads to dukkha, right? So anicca, dukkha. Now this is much more difficult to establish, but something that you can do, so to speak, right? And then the anatta, I'm talking about the Sharvakayana, like the standard, like if you go to Theravada, any Theravada teachings, I think they would teach you this. So establish the truth. Okay, so finally you want to teach the anatta, selflessness, which is the most difficult to establish, because everybody, that's like, I'm here. What do you mean by I'm not here? But all compounded things are impermanent. Yeah, fairly easy to understand, sort of fairly easy to accept. So there are teachers like who says that actually like anicca and dukkha, everything is impermanent, all emotions are dukkha. Now this two statement is Buddha's statement that he did not really meant it as an ultimate truth. that what he really wants to actually teach is the anatta. Because you see, the thing is, the anicca, the impermanent, and the anatta, the selflessness, is a contradiction. Because when you talk about the anicca, impermanence, it does sound like there is something that that becomes impermanent. Whereas when you talk about anatta, there's nothing. Well, even nothing. And if you are talking about a Mahayana, then even nothing is non-existent, so on and so forth. So all the, like statements like things are impermanent, things are all, dukkha, all this is just so that the Buddha Buddha made the truth chewable, sort of like digestible, so to speak, right? So then you establish this way. Now, this is purely when a practitioner is being led to the truth. So I guess we are talking about for a practitioner. Now, when it comes to academic studies, when it comes to hearing and contemplation, then things get much more complicated. So then I'm sure many of you have been, reading like a Vabhyashika, Chitamata school, like then all the way, well, since, as a Tibetan Buddhist follower, I myself have been very much influenced by Prasangika Madhyamika. So there, I mean, basically all view is wrong. It doesn't matter what view, one is supposed to go beyond all the views. So then there's an extensive sort of academic study on how to establish this view. Some of this logic can be quite useful, I think, for the, Western Buddhist academics, because I think, because in the West, I think analyzing is cherished and the critical mind is cherished, but it's almost like they go from one analysis to a certain analyzing, and then they somehow stop. So it's almost like they learn to doubt, but they don't learn to doubt the doubt, so to speak. So I think this is where maybe studies such as the Madhyamika, which is a really good study on how to establish the view, that could help, I think.
Do people have some follow-up questions before we switch subjects? Or Rinpoche, do you have follow-up questions for us?
Is there any sort of project to, really, as I was saying earlier, students studying Buddhist history in general, and especially in the West, how Buddhism came to the West, so to speak? Because, okay, I will give you one example. For instance, like a reincarnation is one very big, touchy subject. So much so that even the traditional Buddhists, such as Zen Buddhists, they rather not talk about it, because they almost feel that reincarnation is the sort of the weak point of Buddhism. But this is where I feel that proper view is not established. I mean, forget reincarnation. Even nirvana is only asserted, especially in the Madhyamika, even nirvana. The Buddha himself said, which means that nirvana is like a milamtabu, like a dream, like an illusion. Even if there's something that is beyond even there's something that is greater than nirvana, that is also like an illusion and like a dream. So when the Buddhists talk about reincarnation, it's only talking during the relative truth, right? But the thing is, I think, this is just my guess, I think many in the West or the modern people, the moment they talk about reincarnation, I think they think in terms of having a soul that actually truly exists, which then transmigrate from one body to another body. By the time you analyze like that, Buddhists don't even believe in a soul. So things like, okay, so the question like, but I still don't believe that one day I'll become a horse. You understand? Now, this is where you see the moment you analyze, I don't know how to say this, if the students can actually explore writings of Gideon Chappell, I think it will really help. He is really good. He's quite sharp. There is, you see, relative truth, especially according to Chandrakirti, is like, you don't want to, there is a certain analytical system to analyze the relative truth, but that cannot be analyzing method to analyze the ultimate truth. You know what I mean? Like you can analyze whether the coffee bean is from Kenya or Guatemala, but the moment you analyze what is coffee bean, and then you chop the coffee bean and try to see, then you will not see coffee bean. But for somebody who likes to drink a coffee and who likes the illusion of sipping the coffee, smelling the coffee, yeah, you can talk about Guatemala coffee with not too much water. Then you label it as a Americano with a less water, espresso. All that is possible. It's all that is accepted. So on that level, I think the Buddhist reincarnation is studied. So this is why I'm trying to bring the sort of two things, which is study of Buddhist history, how Buddhism traveled to the West, and then the other one is a philology, right? The word, the language. So my question actually is there some sort of attention to this?
That's also a big question, I think. When you talk about history, the history of Buddhism coming to the West, you make me think of the scholarship of Donald Lopez, like his book, Curators of the Buddha, analyzing the imperialist and colonial ideas that, say, British people who were in India had about the people they were encountering. And so these projections of Christian values and also values that had to do with domination, how this plays in to the backdrop of how we understand Buddhism. I think that legacy lives on in academia today.
What an important, that is an important thing to know, I feel. Donald's, that I think so important.
I think we're still really thinking about that and trying to undo that, or trying to shine analysis on it in order to see it as the coffee bean once you dissect it and it falls apart, where there's a process going on. Would anybody else add to that?
But ironically, even though I'm asking, is there a study of Buddhist history? Ironically, I think it is safe to say that the West is much more history-centric. I think the Western culture is very into in the beginning, sort of the manufacturing date. When did it happen? So the culture of, like evolution, genesis, Big Bang. How did it all start? It's a very Western culture, isn't it? I'm not saying this is negative. I think that's how the Western think. Now, if you move to the East, and especially India, and based especially with a Advaita Hindu, for instance, or a Buddhism, past is gone, future has not arrived, those two are not important. All you have is this now, present moment. And then, India, Indians have never managed to properly put, record like how the Chinese have done or how the Westerners have done. They've never carved on, keeping record of what happened in the past was never an issue. And this, by the way, actually permeates even to me, for instance, like when I grow up, when I grow up, when I was studying, never taught much about history. It's almost like it's a waste of time to study these things. So the culture is not there. So then not only culture, I mean, the studying the history culture, it's, I don't know what to say. It's like it's a culture that really, talks about how this moment thing. And so therefore, the myth, legend, and the reality are very, very closely linked. And I was reading a Hindu guru's biography. And as I was reading, it's almost like a biography of the many of our Tibetan gurus. So-and-so appeared, and then, like so-and-so lived 500 years. It will be very difficult for Western or modern-minded people to accept. But I think if the students can actually be more receptive about the culture that really does not. I mean, Indian culture is a very, very paradoxical, and we really don't know, like, what is good today is next day is not a good thing. It's very, very, like, I mean, like all the myriad of gods that you see in India, today one god is the most important. Tomorrow, that same God is a retinue God, like that. So this is where, this is where the things like this exist. I think the students, if the students can be aware of that, probably it will help appreciate some of these sort of nuances and I don't know.
Rinpoche, if I might ask you a question related to this. So I study Guru Rinpoche, and so my question is about those of us who are scholars and also practitioners of the tradition, and this relationship between myth and legend and history that you're pulling out. So how do we as scholar practitioners approach, so there's very little historical evidence that Guru Rinpoche was like an actual person that came from India, but of huge significance.
Yes.
In pioneering the tradition. And so how would you recommend that we approach subjects like that as practitioner scholars?
As just before I was saying, if you can understand, where, okay, so Guru Rinpoche is born in the lotus, right? How ridiculous is that? Now, for the modern people, this is like, so it's like really like a fairy tale. It's like in the department of Cinderella and all that kind of thing. But, then again, you look at the liturgy and the words of Guru Rinpoche. If you look into that, and by the way, there's many great masters such as Zelen Natso Rangdol, who actually argues that Guru Rinpoche is actually like a normal human being, born from the womb, so on and so forth. I mean, and by the way, even in Tibet, there were a lot of new translation people who laughed at the Nyingmapas, who are the followers of Guru Rinpoche. You are Guru Rinpoche born in the lotus, how ridiculous is that? They said this. And as an answer to that, the Nyingmapas also tell, well, you know, Buddha Shakyamuni is supposedly born from the what? The right side of the, you know, there's this kind of story. So this is what I mean. These are the things that you hear from lands like India. Another thing maybe the students should do is you should also go to India before it has too much, you know, rationalism. At the moment, there's still a little bit of, I would not say irrational. I'm sure there's a lot of that, but you know, things that does not really make sense, but at the same time, it is very powerful. Things like this still exist. And I think that's really important. I think this is something that we should not lose it. Because rationalism, logic, empiricism, I think it really deprives us from a lot of this richness. Anyway, going back to Guru Rinpoche, now if you look at the Guru Rinpoche's world, the lotus really symbolizes the devotion. And this connects very well with, you know, even Shakyamuni's Buddha said, you know, like if there is a devotion, there is a Buddha. You know, the Buddha is basically a projection, and this connects very well with the Buddhist view. For instance, if I'm looking at somebody and if I don't like this person, I see him as a nasty, terrible person, and that's my projection. Just like that, if I am, you know, if I'm looking at somebody as a savior, I don't know, a saint, whatever, like a Guru Rinpoche, it's a projection coming from your mind. And yeah, this is another thing. Lot of these teachings are you know taught using symbol, poetic language. You know, I'm sure you have read this, you know, in the Hindu Tantra. I think it's in the Kashmiri Tantra, Shiva Tantra. It's a very beautiful, you know, there's a small episode where I think Parvati asked Shiva, please teach me Tantra. And Shiva said, well, when after many requests, Shiva said, well, then you and I have to be in union and in love. The reason is when you are in love, no logic. You know, this much we know, right? When we fall in love, we have no logic. People who we can't possibly love, we love. And then their smell is the best, their appearance is the best. All logic goes out of the window. Even the most ardent logicians, critical thinking people, scientists, I'm sure when they fall in love, every logic goes out of the window. So Shiva's statement, I think is very profound. Like logic and rationalism is the obstacle to understand the profound teachings such as the Tantra. You know, so in this context, if you can appreciate the Guru Rinpoche, and after all, there is not a single teachings that is related to Guru Rinpoche that does not say that you and the Guru Rinpoche is one. Even in practice, let's say if you are doing a sadhana of Guru Rinpoche dissolve into you or you dissolve into Guru Rinpoche, and in that inseparability, you try to do this and that. What does this say? You know, it's really not like some sort of an almighty, truly existing, externally existing Guru Rinpoche who was born so-and-so date, you know. So these are teachings of non-duality, trying to articulate with a dualistic words. What can you expect? You know, this is probably the only way.
Thank you so much. I would like to open the floor to any other people that may have questions or responses. Kempo Yeshi, I see you raising your hand.
Rinpoche, Trashidale Kung Kamsang. I'm a little bit confused with following so much threads to remember back to beginning from your speech, but somehow Rinpoche, you mentioned that this Western academic way of tracing back the history in the West, how Buddha Dharma comes, and also if we talk about Kawakumba Juba, view, conduct, meditation, and so forth, and the view is important, and from there, the truth is need to understand, if I correctly.
Yes.
But then it comes to the history, then East and West history are different. And then here, the richness of this myth and legend and Guru Rinpoche and so forth, biography and hagiography, that seems Rinpoche is saying that we should not eliminate that part. We should cherish that part. And how sort of search truth, history with this fantastic kind of history that we cherish, how we can reconcile these two.
I think what I'm hoping is if the student, I don't know, maybe it's a very big asking, because especially, I know the modern education system really cherishes, logic and empiricism, right? But I think if there is a way, okay, so if you go to, I don't know, like if you go to another, planet, right? Where, I don't know, like shaking hand is not a right thing to do, then you will need to really understand that and appreciate that and learn that and, try to refrain shaking hands, so to speak, right? And especially India and I think China, these two countries has, probably there's a few other more, had almost 2000 years, probably more, of history of really dealing with, studying written books regarding the observer, the mind. So in other words, probably things like Genesis, like evolution, this is not something that they were too impressed with, so to speak. And this is something that if the modern students can appreciate, okay, so these guys don't, okay, so if I'm reading, so this is what I was saying. So like Guru Rinpoche, for instance, Guru Rinpoche never died, right? Now, what does that mean? Is it just a story? Or is it coming from a culture and a tradition that really talks about, the non-duality of death and birth? Now, if you can maybe sort of see that aspect, then I think generally the students who study the Asian study, and especially the Hindu or Buddhist studies, I think they can get a lot from this kind of analogy and examples. And I don't know, I mean, like even looking at a painting, I always say this, like if you're looking at a painting of a deity, and this is actually coming from Gedun Chapel, a deity is sitting on a lotus. How come the lotus is not squished and flattened? And this tells us that this is a culture that really this comes from a culture or the philosophy, or I don't know, it comes from people who don't make too much, I don't know, not only not pay too much attention, sometimes even detest. You know, like I said, I know this is a waste of time talking about this. This is how I grew up myself. Okay.
And yes, lately I'm reading Vimanintik, Heart Essence of Vimalamitra, and there emphasizes the loju, which is kind of generating students' confidence or faith. The loju
Yes.
is the purpose of the generating faith.
Yeah.
So it's not other way what Westerners analyze it. And also
Yes.
in the West, I think they believe that Muhammad and Jesus are also born without father, so it's not miracle birth sort of. So it's
Right,
not
right.
totally
Right.
without miracles.
Yes. Now, if Christianity talks about, Kala Tongpa Nirungwa, Tela Thamje Rungwa Yin, if they can talk about the Shunyata, then I think you can talk about as many myths as possible. Magic, myth, all of this. And this is how I would argue, So anyway, coming back to your Loju history, yes, you are right. Even though, I mean, what I was saying is that I was sort of generally comparing between the West and the East regarding how much emphasis is put on the history and the record of, stuff like this. Okay, let's talk about Loju. So, for instance, like a Bimanyingtik or any kind of a Tantra, and actually even the Sutra, the very big, statement is like, what is it? What is Mahamaya? Or, what is it? No, not Mahamaya. Evam Maya. Evam Maya. Now, loosely translating, thus have I heard. So, thus have I heard. Now, that is a sort of a history, isn't it? Because once when Buddha was in Vulture's Peak, at that time. So usually when we talk about a loju or a history, we talk about 5 things: the teacher, the teaching, the time, the disciple, right? So we talk about the 5 aspects. Now it is interesting.
Place, ne.
Place, ne. But it is very interesting. As we talk more and more history, then as you know, like when we really go deeper and further, then what do we say? Tempa Chojiku, Buddha Dharmakaya. Where is he? He has no form, he has no mouth, nothing. What did he teach? Singru Mepaki, no words, no language. To whom did he teach? His own reflection. When did he teach? All the time. Where did he teach? Everywhere. So this is how, this is what we end up hearing. And just to give us more example, even in Hinduism, like if you are reading something like a Vishnu or a Shiva, they say they're very, very similar, actually. They say that even you and I talking right this very moment is a dream of Vishnu, nothing else. So I think these are really very, very wealthy wealth. It's such a wealth that us students like you and me, we can really enjoy and really expand and crack our head. Otherwise, we get too imprisoned by some sort of a, like a ta, we call it in Tibetan, ta is some sort of a boundary, a box. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know whether I'm ever making any sense, but I was telling Nishita, all the questions that I have received is something that really requires a lot of talking, but I guess that's what we are doing. Hopefully I'm answering some of your question.
Dashidela Rinpochela. So my question is that, Rinpoche, do you feel that a historical and a cultural analysis about Buddhism can benefit the Buddhist communities? How can it best do that?
Well, as I've been repeating, I think it really will help because culture, when we talk, history, when we talk about history, we are talking about a story, like a people's, what happened to people, how they migrated, and that how they ate, how they drank, how they ruled, that also. But more importantly, we will be talking about things like language, isn't it? And the language, wow, that is one really, because I never even realized this myself, in the past, until recently when I'm doing this 84,000 Kanjuru translation. It's like mind-boggling. So, I mean, the very Tibetan language itself is changing now, evolving. So a lot of the things that, the words, the Tibetan language nowadays, and it's very interesting, by the way, youngsters like you, for instance, I don't know where you come from, where you studied, but anyway, youngsters, those who grow up in India, those who have studied in Kalimpong, those who studied in Mussoorie, when they speak, and even though they're using the Tibetan language, they are meaning English because they have read things like Jane Austen. They have in their head Charles Dickens. They have, Jane Austen, you understand? So they speak, that's what they are meaning, Now, this is a very interesting. Now we have a young generation coming from Tibet, from China, those who have gone through the Chinese universities and Chinese training. They have a different sort of interpretation of the words. So I guess this is, inevitable. This is something that we need to be aware of, I think. And definitely to study, Buddhism. I always say that if I'm like the Kim Jong-un of Buddhism, I will ban words like enlightenment. I will ban words like compassion. I will ban words like a meditation. They are not only not bringing the real meaning of Gom, Nyingje, Tharba. They're actually distorting it. And but what can we do? We have to use a language, right? So this is where people like you guys can maybe, really stir these things. You guys can maybe, and this is why what you guys are doing there is such an important task, job.
So I noticed that Pema has their hand up, so I'm gonna switch over to Pema, but I also just wanted to say, Rinpoche, that you're emphasizing language a lot, and you are also speaking to some Tibetans that come from the Chinese system, as you just described, and you're speaking to some Tibetans who have been educated more in India. So both of those communities are listening to you right now. And I'm just wondering, as you're reflecting on the project 84,000 and how important language is, what should we be doing to preserve and respect the Tibetan language? Is it the art of translation that we should be teaching classes on and focusing on? Is it a kind of, so if enlightenment and compassion are not the right words, do we then seek to popularize the meaning of Tarpa and Ningje? What should we focus on? And then Pema, after you're next.
Ah, wow, that's difficult. I can only tell you that those are not doing the job, but I think at least this much information that they are not doing the justice, they are not doing the correct translation. I think just to know that is already quite good, I would say, but substitute words, I really don't know. Wow, this is difficult. I mean, I toss around, I like words like awakening, for instance, like a tharva, seeing the truth, those are good, but then, you know, you also have to inspire people. This is why I really, you know, I should say, I'm even more impressed with the Buddhist teaching of Dangden and Ngeden, you know, like expedient teaching and the direct teaching. I guess this is why it existed like that. I'm only here to just bring this up. I don't know what is the right word. This is something that hopefully you guys can come up with. You know, hopefully you guys can. And, you know, actually there is some questions regarding the practice, you know, how important the practice is. And I think, yes, this is where I think practitioner, but then, you know, the word practice, especially within the Buddhist context, is very soiled. This word is very contaminated. I think the word practice is immediately referring to the Buddhists as something to do with sitting, something to do with like counting mantras, something to do with like, I don't know, reading a sadhana or a prostrations or making offerings. Drupa, sadhana, you know, it's not really that, is it? It's really, really like getting acquainted to the view. I mean, okay, so somebody says that, okay, all compounded things are impermanent. Now, my practice is really to establish this in my heart, in my system, in my emotion, so that when I say goodbye to you today, if I have this sort of pang of sadness, like this may be it, this may be my last time seeing you guys here. That's what I call practice of the, you know, impermanence. But then, you know, now chanting, oh, everything is impermanence, 100,000 times is considered practice. So it has degenerated a lot.
Hello, Tashi Delay Rinpoche. Earlier when you were talking about philosophy, I guess. So my question often in Buddhist studies has been about what I think that there's these obstacles that come from the Western category of philosophy, just as there are these obstacles maybe that come from religion. And what I mean by that is that, you know, it's like we can think in philosophy that we intellectually know something and understand something, and it's very easy, even for philosophers, like when you're in that English category of philosophy, to say, oh, I understand emptiness, I know about this, like that makes sense to me. And yeah, so I guess I would be curious if you have any thoughts about how to get past that kind of, that intellectual, the limits of that intellectual knowing, even in an academic context, to let students know what you were just saying about how you take it into your heart. It has to become, it pervades everything. Yeah.
Yeah, you are talking about gom, isn't it? You are talking about what we call practice. Yes, that's the difficult one, isn't it? Yes, it is. Just again, I think, I don't know so much, but I think in the West, the rationalism, somehow they stopped there, I feel. And then they got so, like, wow, rationalism, I think they got stopped there. And I wish they go beyond that. Of course, irrationalism, paganism, all those things are okay, they're rubbish, whatever. Then rationalism, fantastic. But let's go beyond that. So if there is a little bit of that, like longing, because, rationalism at the end of the day, if you really think about it, it's a really, really sophisticated way of making yourself an idiot, basically, because it's really limiting. It's like you have become a slave of some sort of a yardstick. So you need to really have that kind of longing, and that can come anywhere, and it has come to you. I mean, it does come to, I mean, I'm not encouraging this, but like, why do people drink? Why do people take drugs? Because you feel really good when you don't. Okay, normally I wouldn't walk around naked, but because I feel shy, because I don't like to show my, I don't know, ugly knees. But hey, tonight, who cares? And I like that. Like sometimes get out of that sort of a prison, So I think if that kind of a longing, I think this is what, and if, sometimes in the Dharma, they talk about disciple of superior faculties. This is it. This is one of the most important ingredients, like wanting to really just shrug off from all this logic and, whatever, you understand. I would say, like, if you are studying something like a Tsema, Buddhist pramana, they have a 4 different pramana: logic, or a cognition, direct cognition, or a cognition is not the right word, maybe. What is it? The way they validate. If you study this a little bit, probably it may also help, because the Buddhists would say, especially the Brahmana people will say, that all other 3 are kind of a valid, but not really a valid. So they are like things like your eyes, like my eyes are now looking at your picture. This is unsum tsema. It's like direct cognition. That's valid. You are there, I'm here, and then inferential, like inferring, oh, there's a smoke, so there must be a fire. It happened because of in the past, so on and so forth. So anyway, there's all that tsema. Now in the Pramana, they said that the real tsema is Nanjur Munsum, the yogis, experience that. But to whom should we say this? People will think that we have gone crazy, right? But the yogi's way of seeing things, uncontaminated by logic, unbound and crippled by rationalism, and just so open. This is what I think we need to sort of market this a little bit, I guess. Okay.
So my question is, So Chensei Foundation has been pivotal for spreading Dharma in the academic field in the US. So what's your motivation for creating endowed professors in the universities in the US? And what's your vision for the future?
Wow. Okay. As I said right at the beginning, some gomsum. So starting with the thesam, it can never go wrong. I think lack of thesam is always a problem. Now, place like Tibet, we have been blessed. There's a little bit of a irony here. Yes, state should never be involved with the religion because it does have a lot of downfall. But the thing is, state sponsorship also brings some good things. For instance, like in Tibet, like Songtsen Gampo, Tisong Dilsen, Tirabachen, they sponsored, right? So when Buddha Dharma came from India to Tibet, even Guru Rinpoche suffered, even Bimalamitra suffered. There are people like saying, hey, this is a Hindu black magic. Who is this, Guru Rinpoche? Who is this? There were, people like Berotana suffered a lot. He was banished. So there was a lot of scrutiny. So that really established quite a strong root of Tibetan Buddhist study in Tibet. But now, in the modern world, especially in the West, like in Europe, in America, Buddhism sort of really spread it haphazard. Beatles, I don't know, John Lennon, I forgot some of the, Jai Guru Deva, all that songs, drugs. They're all good, by the way. They're all very good. I think they're all bodhisattvas incarnate. As a Buddhist, I would say that. Vietnam War, and then all those hippies who went to Nepal in search for some sort of ecstasy, but bump into great masters. But then, we, the lamas, we have never really offered these people systematic sort of study. So I think, I just feel that the lamas like myself, we have really, maybe like 30, 40 years behind. We should have done this way before when, because I don't know how much of this interest in Buddhism will remain, especially in the West. Trend is so fast. And sometimes the trends are quite scary. For instance, now, I think in the West, there's some sort of a romantic and excitement about meditation, about mindfulness. And this worries me too, because, no academic studies, no Uma, no Tsema, no non-duality, just sitting on the meditation, then it's going to really water down too much. And then I think this is where I feel that guardian of Buddhism in the West will be the academics, at least for now. I'm speaking as a Buddhist.
In closing, we would like to ask you two things. One is that what can early PhD scholars avoid, any pitfalls? And secondly, for us as a group for this lecture series, are there any things that we should focus on or any goals that we should keep in mind?
Oh, this is, I don't know what you can do, but as I have sometimes teased you, and which I will do this also with other students, I think it would be good if, especially if there are students here who are studying Tibetan Buddhism, I think you should also study about the down fall or the flaw of the Tibetan politics in the past. I'm talking about how lamas were corrupted and all of that. I think that's good to actually have a proper, objective, analytical study, because I'm not asking you to do this for any other reason than because that also has an impact on how you study Buddhism. It does, because many times when the Tibetan Lamas, especially when we teach Buddhism, we end up teaching the Tibetanism, so to speak, Tibetan culture, and unless you are doing a Tibetology, unless you are doing a PhD on Tibetan culture-related Buddhism, if you really want to study Buddhism, then oftentimes the Tibetan culture can get into the way. But so at least if the students can sort of differentiate between, the Tibetan culture and the Dharma, that could really help for the future practitioners, students, whatever. That's about all I can think of at the moment.
Rinpoche, thank you so much for your time and your generosity and your wisdom and sharing with us. It has really been an incredible honor to gain wisdom from you.
Thank you.
I hope that we will have another opportunity to invite you back. I feel like we've only just begun. And if I'm reading the room right here, we actually have a million other questions we would love to talk with you about, but we're aware of the late hour in Taiwan. So may this be the beginning and not the end.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very looking forward to see you again. Well, I'm really honored to speak to all of you, and your questions are really important, very big. I hope at least I managed to sort of, create more questions in your head. I didn't have any intention of actually managing to answer it, but these are very important questions. Hope to see you. Please take care. Wash your hands, social distance, all of that. I think is important, and especially the Buddhist students. As I said earlier, I really believe that those who have done hearing, and especially hearing and contemplation, they will be, if they are there, they will be always a bit of a nag. So what do you call it? People who are nagging, people who make noise. Because there will be a lot of charlatans, those who are, this, that, like mindfulness this, mindfulness that. We need a little bit of people who, what do you think? This, all that, people who nag, people who make noise, basically. And I think that's important for Buddhism, that noise makers. So I hope all of you become good noise makers.